My name is Maggie Ullman. I'm the chair of our Environment and Safety Committee here at the City of Asheville. Welcome to our November 28th meeting. All of our committee meetings, our members and staff are participating virtually, and we are streaming this on our Virtual Engagement Hub, which is accessible through the Virtual Engagement Hub link on the front page of our website. We also have an option for the public to listen live by phone. For those of you out there with us today, welcome. For today's meeting, we have the option for people to call in and comment live during the meeting. To call in and comment live, use the same number, 855-925-2801, meeting code 9477. Your phone will be muted. You'll hear the meeting live. At this point, speakers will need to push *3 to enter the speaker queue. I'm now going to do a roll call vote to introduce our committee members and our staff who are joining us today. As I say your name, please come off mute and say a quick hello. Our Vice Mayor, Sandra Kilgore.
Good morning, everyone.
Also, our Councilwoman, Shanika Smith.
Good morning.
Our City Manager, Deborah Campbell.
Good morning.
Our Assistant City Manager, Ben Woody.
Good morning.
I think our Assistant City Manager, Rachel Wood, is here also.
Good morning.
Hey, Rachel. We also have our Deputy City Attorney, John Maddox.
Good morning.
Our Deputy Police Chief, Jackie Stepp. Hey, Jackie.
Morning.
Also, our Deputy Police Chief, Mike Lamb.
Good morning.
We also have our Interim Fire Chief, Chris Budzinski.
Good morning.
Our Sustainability Director, Bridget Herring.
Good morning, everyone.
Hey, Bridget. Our Transportation Director, Ken Putnam, is with us.
Good morning.
Hey, Ken. Our Public Works, wow, we have a VIP list today. I'm loving it. Our Public Works Director, Greg Schuler.
Good morning, everyone.
Our Sanitation Division Manager, Jess Foster.
Good morning.
And our Waste Reduction Manager, Alex Miller.
Good morning.
Hello, everybody. Thanks, everybody, for being here. We're excited. It's a big meeting, lots of fun stuff to talk about. And I will go ahead and just kick us off into our agenda. So to get us started, as we do in the public safety, in the environment and public safety, we start with a public comment section and we end with a public comment section. So is there anyone in our first round of public comment?
Yes, Madam Chair. Caller ending in 6147. You'll be given 3 minutes. You're unmuted and you may begin.
Hello, this is Monique Pierre calling in from the Housing Authority City of Asheville. I'm very pleased that the committee has taken up this very important issue to our residents and to our citizens, of course, in the City of Asheville. Parking enforcement for Hillcrest community, it's something that we've been working on and hoping for quite some time. We're very grateful for our city manager and all of the individuals who have been supporting our work and listening and being very responsive. So we're very appreciative. The Housing Authority is committed to creating better communities overall. One of our objectives is, of course, crime reduction, efforts to increase the quality of life at our public housing sites. And we believe that this is the first step together that we can take along with the city to help this happen. So we're very grateful, and that's all I have to contribute today. Thank you.
Thanks, Monique. Appreciate that. Look forward to discussing that later today. Do we have any other folks on public comment?
No, Madam Chair.
All right. Thank you. We will jump into our second order of business, which is approval of the October 24th, 2023 minutes. Do I have a motion?
Sandra. So moved. Second.
All right, we have a motion and a second. Roll call order. Vice Mayor Kilgore.
Aye.
Councilwoman Smith.
Aye.
Myself as an aye. The motion passes. Next, we move on to the Municipal Climate Action Implementation Update. We're seeking a vote right now on a recommendation that staff is bringing us. And I'll pass it over to Bridget.
Good morning, Council. My name is Bridget Herring, and I have the pleasure to serve as the Sustainability Director with the City of Asheville. I'm here today to talk to you about an engagement opportunity at the North Carolina Utilities Commission. As you're aware, the Municipal Climate Action Plan identifies action to make progress on Council's adopted sustainability and climate goals. And to make progress on those goals, we need changes in policy and partnerships with our utility at the state level. So next slide. The key takeaways is that engagement in utility level and state level policy was identified as a high impact activity in the Municipal Climate Action Plan. And not only is this an opportunity to highlight the partnership we already have with Duke Energy, but also to advocate for clean, renewable electricity for not only us as an organization, but our businesses and residents. And that intervening in this docket at the North Carolina Utilities Commission ensures that our comments will be considered by all parties involved. So moving on to the next slide. So what is a carbon plan integrated resource plan? That's a mouthful and it's a bad acronym, but it's basically two plans that are kind of combined into one. And so the carbon plan is the plan that the utilities put together every 2 years to determine how they're going to meet their statutory requirements for carbon reduction. That was included in House Bill 951. And the integrated resource plan, which is their load growth forecast, basically how much electricity they think they're going to need to generate over some time horizon, generally between 10 to 20 years, and what kind of assets they're going to use or generation mix to meet that load. So moving on to the next slide, you might wonder what's in it. So this plan includes 3 options, and it's not really all that important that you go into this chart, but basically what it shows you is the different types of generation assets that the utility plans to either take offline and decommission or bring online to meet both the load and the carbon reduction goal. And the different pathways pretty much have near the same end results, but they have different interim goals. So there's goals by 2030, there's goals by 2050. And so this brings on different types of assets at different times. And the Duke Energy is recommending that pathway that's labeled as P3 is the one that the Utilities Commission approved them to move forward with. So moving forward to the next slide, why does this care and how does this impact us? Basically, the type of electricity that Duke Energy will provide us, again, as I mentioned, some of the assets that currently exist will be decommissioned and some new ones will be built and generated. And where those assets are either taken offline or brought online are going to have a significant environmental impact on the surrounding communities, and as well as all of us as ratepayers, because that's the energy that is being provided to us and the associated environmental impacts. This also influences the access that the city as an organization, as well as our residents and businesses have to be able to reduce their use through energy efficiency or power their homes and businesses with renewable energy. And as I mentioned, those different pathways put different types of assets online at different times, and there's a different cost that's associated with that. So everybody who's a ratepayer, which means everybody who pays a Duke Energy electricity bill, will be impacted on the cost of that, both economically and the environmental impact and cost to that as well as these different scenarios are deployed over time. So moving on to the next slide. So the opportunity that we have as an organization is to engage in a North Carolina Utilities Commission docket. So basically that's the file that they host to have this plan under statutory review. As I mentioned, the Utilities Commission approves this plan, and that allows Duke Energy to move forward both in building these assets and building out efficiency programs and renewable procurement programs and whatnot. So in order to participate as an intervener, we have to do something that's called demonstrating standing. And basically that just means we have to show the Utilities Commission that we have a vested interest in the outcome of this plan, that we are going to be significantly impacted. And so the city, both as a large energy consumer, as an organization, as well as a steward for our community members, that's the way that we'll demonstrate that standing. And so the Utilities Commission gives more weight to these comments, which is why we want to intervene and have them officially on the record. And this will allow us to have some input into what the final plan is or what's approved ultimately by the North Carolina Utilities Commission. So if we move to the next slide, I want to give you a little context on how this was prioritized by staff for those of you out there that might feel like this is a bit random. So every year, council identifies priorities. So this action supports your neighborhood and climate resilience priorities. Staff puts together our organizational work plan projects to support the advancement of those goals. This falls under the Municipal Climate Action Plan Phase 1 implementation. And I'll reorient you to that plan as well. So if we move to the next slide, that plan is divided into 3 goals. So goal 1 is the physical things the city owns, operates, and maintains, making sure they're sustainable, resilient. Goal 3 is how the city as an organization supports our community in leading sustainable and resilient lives in their homes and businesses. This falls under goal 2, which is how we embed sustainability into policy, practice, and procedures. So moving on further, the plan includes 22 high impact activities. So under goal, we have focus areas, and then we have the individual activities. So this is number 15, which is to monitor and engage in state level and utility policy. And the implementation timeframe is ongoing because we were doing this activity before we adopted the MCAP. And we see this as an opportunity that's going to be ongoing because, as I mentioned, we need policy shifts at a higher levels of government than we have access to be able to reach the goals that you all have adopted. So next slide. So again, to break this down a little bit further, when we adopted our 100% renewable energy goal for municipal operations by 2030 and community-wide by 2042, we worked with a consultant to kind of figure out what were the things that were going to help us get there and meet that goal. So the report is linked in the bottom left-hand corner of this presentation in case anybody wants to go and remind themselves of it. But just to acclimate you to this, the very bottom line, that dark blue line, is what Duke Energy already provides. Then you can see that light blue line, and that was local planned actions at the time. So that was the installation of solar on the transit station and some of our community centers and fire stations. There's like a tiny little line that doesn't even, it looks like a divider more than a line. That's additional planned actions, which is continuing to put solar on our facilities and continue to invest in energy efficiency. And then if we move to the next slide, it highlights this green bucket, which is changes at the state level or at the utility level, the grid level mix. And you can see that's the second largest opportunity we have to reach that goal. And above that in the orange is basically purchasing renewable energy credits, which we're trying to avoid because we want to make sure that the investment we make to meet our goal, we retain the economic impact of that as well as the environmental impact in our utility territory. So moving on, this also touches on our climate emergency and our climate justice initiative. So as we started to look at our residents that are most impacted by climate change, one of the metrics that we looked at was energy burden, which means that you're spending more than 30% of your income on your household utility bills, which is significantly more than the majority of people. And so we want to really make sure that we're thinking about equitable access, both in terms of being able to get this energy and also to make sure that it's not a premium product. So moving, and the Climate Justice Initiative is also linked on this slide in case anybody wants to go there to refresh on that as well. So moving to the next slide. So what are our priorities for the comments that we're going to put in? And here I'm going to go through this list, and if there's other things that come to mind for you all as council members or you have questions on, I would invite you to provide some feedback or input on that. But really focusing on, as I mentioned, equitable access to clean renewable energy for everybody that lives in the city. Making sure that that electricity is reliable, affordable, and resilient. Removing barriers to participation in energy efficiency programs or installing renewable energy on your home or business. Making sure that previous input that was provided not only by us, but our community partners continues to be considered in the process, and that an inclusive stakeholder engagement process continues to remain for this and future iterations of these plans. As I mentioned, they are redeveloped every 2 years. And then enabling the city to meet our goals. So as I mentioned, we want to retain the economic benefit in our community. We want to retain the environmental benefit in our community. And so we need to have access to procuring renewable energy in that way through our utility. So I guess I'll pause there and see if there's anything.
Vice Mayor?
Thank you very much, Bridget, for all this information. I must say it is because I'm not an expert, don't have the background knowledge to understand a lot of these things. I do have a few questions. Okay, like one of the questions that you were talking about, and I didn't see the scale, that slide where you had the P, one,
The
two,
different pathways?
yeah, exactly, and that impact. You were talking about the cost for the consumer. What would you say the percentage of the cost are we looking at, by adopting this plan?
So I would have to go, so it'll be distributed amongst all the ratepayers because that's how the utility does. And it matters when the generation comes online and changes. So I don't think the plan includes this is how much a residential bill would increase. I don't think they have that
Okay.
laid out in this.
Okay. And one of the other questions I was noticing when you were basically had the scale basically showing the actions that have been taken. And it looked like as far as the solar panels and different things like that, there's been a decline in actually people participate in those programs. Is that what I'm seeing there where you had the blue line, but then you had the ongoing renewable efforts, which was the white sort of line? Is that
so? That just looks at, so that one was just for municipal operations, and that looks at the size of the opportunity. So what we know is if we were able to put solar on all of our rooftops of all of our facilities, which we know we can't because some of our rooftops are special, right? Like City Hall has a unique historic rooftop that we wouldn't put solar on that. But if we could put it on there, it's not enough space, physical space, to generate the amount of energy that we consume. So that means we have to deploy multiple strategies in order to meet that goal. And so one of those things is for example, Buncombe County, utilized the closed landfill to put solar panels out there on them, and the utility is taking that electricity and distributing it, but the county is able to retain the credits from that to be able to count towards their renewable energy goal. So that's a large scale something. And so Duke Energy offers different programs for people to be able to purchase renewable energy. And so we want to make sure that those programs are accessible, affordable, and reside within our utility territory so that economic and environmental impact is felt. Does that make sense?
Yes. And one last question. I know on the slide where you were showing basically the highest impact for these issues were in the housing. I noticed that the housing communities were highlighted as being in those high impact areas. Could you go back to that slide and explain that? I'm just
Sure. So this is a little recap on, the climate justice initiative. So when we first declared the climate emergency, we wanted to take a moment to figure out where our residents were most vulnerable to climate change. And what we looked at was, and Allison, I don't know if you can go back to that slide. It is there it was, slide 12. We looked at a number of different factors and layered them on top of each other to see who was experiencing and in this, the most impacts to climate change. And so what this shows on this map is the different things that we looked at to understand who might be facing vulnerabilities here. So one thing, and the icons show you what they looked at. So we looked at our climate resilience assessment and where the vulnerabilities were to landslides, flooding, wildfire, heat, right? And so that was something that was a layer that we looked at. We looked at social vulnerability to say, as the CDC defines it. So looking at health impacts and outcomes, And then energy burden, as I mentioned, which means on average in like that census block group, those households are spending more money on their utilities than the average individual. So like all those things. And then we looked also at like red line neighborhoods to see how past policies might have also exacerbated the situation for different communities. And so we saw kind of all those factors kind of line up to increase the stress that some of our community members are facing. And so then we also starred where the housing authority properties are in this map. So that was all how we wanted to decide who to talk to about their experience, because these people are experiencing maybe more stress from the changing climate than some of our other residents. And that's where we focused our engagement to help us define what is climate justice, what is climate equity, what does climate resilience mean to Asheville, to these communities.
Great. Thank you so much. Appreciate it.
Mm-hmm.
Bridget, thank you. Bridget, when we had the water outage, did we use this map to help us identify where we needed to focus our efforts? That's how we're using this map in terms of vulnerability related to resiliency in any type of emergency, so to speak, that we have in the community, to make sure that we are reaching the communities that are most vulnerable.
Right. And this is just one tool. And that, you know, we have an organizational work plan to help integrate this information into our operations and how we consider, plan, and respond to projects and needs of our community. And I'm happy to come back on a separate time and speak directly to an update on where that project is at as well, if that would be helpful to the group.
I also think this map is useful as we look forward to, like, we've been talking on and off about resilience hubs and where would they go. I would think the yellow areas are the primary target, right? Because we know that there's a higher vulnerability there. So it allows us, I think there used to be a practice in government, in local government, where we thought green stuff anywhere is better than nothing. And maybe at the time that felt okay. But what we learned is that government money was subsidizing green investments in private homeowners who tended to have higher wealth. And that's not okay. It's not okay for there to be government rebates for the wealthiest so they can put solar on their house. And that's where something started from before. And so this map and the work that the city's done around climate justice ensures that when there's government support and resources, it's to those that are most vulnerable, not those that are first in line or those that have the resources to get access. So I think it's a good layer for us. I had a question onto the slide, Bridget, that you had stopped us of priorities for our comments. I know this is a lot of info. Thank you so much. I'll say high level. I'll echo something that you'd said, actually, Bridget, that one of the, if not the most impactful thing Asheville can do to pursue our climate goals is be an advocate at the state level, because we fundamentally will not reach our climate goals unless we see state policy and state utility dynamics change. And so you've been an outspoken leader on our behalf at the city, and the city has been an outspoken leader in the state. And I think supporting this recommendation continues that leadership role, and I'm excited for it. And my question is, the final bullet on this slide, the enable the city to meet adopted goals through electricity generated within our utility district. Can you like demystify that a little bit? Does that mean that we want to have like that we want to be able to purchase renewable energy from suppliers? Because right now we can only ever purchase renewable energy for ourselves or from the utility if there's no third party. So is this nudging towards third party renewable production?
It could be. It could also be redefining the way that those services are offered through Duke Energy and giving them a signal of what we're looking for in a program. So right now, there's currently like a program where we can buy renewable energy credits, but we can't determine the location of those. And so Duke Energy goes out and buys those on our behalf, and they could come from Texas or Oklahoma or whatnot. And that's not how we want to spend our resources, right? Because we want to make sure our that economic impact is felt somewhat locally and that environmental impact is felt somewhat locally, right? So our utility territory is kind of a funky thing because, you know, Duke Energy provides electricity across the state, but then it's also broken up into regions, and we are in the Duke Energy Progress West region. Duke Energy Progress has space here and in Western counties. It also has Raleigh to the east, so Raleigh to Wilmington. They have territory in that space. And so the assets can be located in any of those places, but I think that still at least brings it home to North Carolina and allows
So
us that.
It supports our goals for economic development more locally, because this whole pursuit in our climate goals isn't solely around climate. We want to make sure that it's just and that it's good for our economy and good for our businesses. And so this type of priority helps nudge at that. We don't want you going and spending money somewhere else just to reach the goal. We want economic development from it also.
Absolutely. And this list is just kind of the lens to give people the thought of how we drill down into more specific recommendations about some of the programs and some of the more kind of technical pieces of how a utility is run. And so just want to make sure that this feels like it resonates with you all and your goals.
Thanks.
Deborah.
The only thing that I would add, we mentioned Duke a number of times, and I wanted to offer that we have a good partner in Duke, and these things actually helps with our collaboration. That we met with them prior to obviously coming to the committee, had discussions about what was going to be presented. So I just wanted to make sure that you all understood definitely that this is a collaborative effort between the city and Duke. But we have all of these things from a state regulatory perspective that we have to do in order to advance that partnership and collaboration. So.
Absolutely. Like, we want the Utilities Commission to know that there's appetite for these types of programs, that there's support, so that when Duke is coming to them with a creative, innovative, out of the box idea, that there's the reason for that. And so we're trying to show up in this space to be a good partner and tell the regulators that, yes, we want this, and to support them in that way, which kind of leads me into my next slide if we're ready to move on. And again, that this is partnership in practice. And so if this moves forward, this will be the third time we've intervened in a docket. So once before was on an integrated resource plan by itself, once before was on the first ever carbon plan. And in both instances, and as well as with this instance, we plan to partner with Buncombe County to submit one level of comments, you know, both to display our shared vision and goals, and to show that continuity and partnership that we have here in Western North Carolina that I think sets us apart sometimes. And it's also an opportunity, as Deborah mentioned, to, you know, strengthen that partnership with Duke and to be able to highlight some of our success. You know, I listed the Blue Horizons project here, and some of you may be familiar that we've been able to work with Duke Energy to pilot innovative efficiency programs that weren't available anywhere else in the state originally, to kind of do proof of concept to make them to be able to be expanded. And so not only do we want to highlight that success and encourage that to continue, but we also want to, you know, encourage other communities to extend this partnership across the state. So next steps are on the next slide. So if this recommends moves forward, it'll go to the December 12th council agenda. Once approved, sustainability staff at the city and county will work together to review the plan and finalize our comments, and then we'll pass it over to our colleagues in the legal department to file that jointly to demonstrate that standing and meet those regulatory requirements to officially intervene in a docket. So with that, I have a suggested motion for you to recommend approving staff's request to work with Buncombe County as an intervener concerning Duke Energy's carbon plan integrated resource plan and forwarding to full council for consideration.
So moved.
Second.
All right, roll call vote. Vice Mayor Kilgore,
Aye.
Councilwoman Smith,
Aye.
and myself, aye. The motion passes. We will see this again at a full council meeting. Thank you so much, Bridget. Your leadership on our city's behalf is so well respected and noted across the state. It's really creating an impact, and I'm grateful.
Thank you.
All right, we will move on to our next agenda item, which is item number 4 on our agenda that our partner spoke to during the public comment. This is parking enforcement in Hillcrest, and we have our transportation director, Ken Putnam, to share with us.
Good morning, council members. Yes, my name is Ken Putnam. I'm the Transportation Department Director, and I'm going to share with you some information about providing parking enforcement for the Asheville Housing Authority. Next slide, please. Key takeaways. The Asheville Housing Authority, they've identified parking issues at its properties that negatively impact a safe and healthy environment. They have asked the city of Asheville to assist with parking enforcement. Many of their interior streets and their developments are privately owned. And there is a general statute 168-301D that gives a city the authority to regulate and administer parking on privately owned public vehicular areas if requested in writing by the owner or person in charge. Next slide, please. So again, the Asheville Housing Authority, they've requested in writing that the city of Asheville regulate and administer parking at its properties within our jurisdiction. They have issues with double and triple parking. It's a major concern because that activity impedes or blocks efficient traffic flow, including emergency response. And again, the general statute gives the city the authority to do this. Next slide, please. Resident outreach. The Asheville Housing Authority staff would primarily take care of all resident outreach before any parking enforcement begins. Asheville City staff would be able to help with that outreach as needed. And the goal is to have voluntary compliance with formal enforcement only used after extensive outreach and resident engagement has occurred. Next slide, please. The action plan, of course, I'm sharing this information with you today to consider recommending that this action move forward to City Council. That would be taken up at December 12th. And the Parking Services Division, assuming everything is approved, we would have the authority to begin that parking enforcement in the Hillcrest community Monday through Friday between the hours of 8 a.m. and 6 p.m. once we receive confirmation that the adequate community engagement has occurred. Next slide, please. And the role of the Parking Services Division would be to provide the primary parking enforcement activities, and the Asheville Police Department would supplement the parking enforcement within their limitations. And that will primarily be after the hours that we're not covering. Next slide, please. And here is the suggested motion that I have. Recommend that City Council adopt an ordinance to enable the City of Asheville to regulate and administer parking at properties owned by the Asheville Housing Authority of the City of Asheville. And with that, I'll try to answer any questions if there are any.
I have one question. So if I'm understanding the basis of this, the reason we need a special motion is because in this particular neighborhood, the streets aren't the city's, but any other neighborhood would already be receiving this service from us, right? So if there was a parking enforcement issue in Montfort or any neighborhood, that's what we do. That's one of our functions. But the difference here is because that ownership. And so if we pass this, which I am interested in, it's just making sure that despite the road ownership, that we give this service to this neighborhood as well as all the others. Is that right?
Yes, no, that's exactly right.
Okay.
And because they've requested.
Great point. Yeah, right. We have such a strong working relationship that we wouldn't go in on our own accord. It's them saying, hey, we want this partnership.
Correct.
Any questions?
If no one has questions, I'd recommend that the city council adopt an ordinance to enable the city of Asheville to regulate and administer parking at properties owned by the housing authority of the city of Asheville.
Second.
All right, roll call vote. Vice Mayor Kilgore,
Aye.
Councilwoman Smith,
Aye.
and myself, the motion passes. Thank you so much, Ken and Monique, if you're still listening. Thank you. We really cherish our partnership and hope to be really supportive and helpful of what's going on right now there.
Thank you.
Okay, now we're on to item number 5, our solid waste master plan with Greg Schuler and Jess Foster. Take it away.
Good morning, Vice Mayor, members of council. My name is Greg Schuler. I'm the Public Works Director. Really happy to provide an update to y'all this morning about a plan that we've had on our plan for some time now. And at this point, I'm going to turn it over to the subject matter expert, Ms. Jess Foster, who is our Sanitation Division Manager. And Jess will do the presentation and we'll both help with questions if you have any.
Thanks, Greg. Good morning, everybody. We'll just go ahead and jump in. I'm excited to talk about our solid waste master plan today. You can go ahead and go to the next slide. So the key takeaways for today's presentation are that the city needs a solid waste master plan to address the growth and the waste management challenges that we're experiencing because of that growth and to advance our waste reduction goals. This plan and process will provide the city with recommendations for short and long-term strategies over the next 20 years. And internal and external engagement with our local partners and stakeholders will be an integral part of that planning process. Next slide. Thank you. So just want to give a little bit of background and talk about the purpose of the plan. So in 2014, Council adopted a goal to reduce our landfill waste by 50% by 2035, which is sneaking up on us. And in 2022, Council prioritized our core service provision and climate resilience as part of their annual priorities. And as Bridget talked about in 2023, the Municipal Climate Action Plan was adopted, and conducting a solid waste master planning process was part of the focus area 2 of that MCAP. And also this fiscal year, Council approved funding for us to conduct a solid waste master planning process. So the purpose of this plan is to look at our existing solid waste management systems and again, provide those short and long-term recommendations to enhance the efficiency and quality of our system and to increase our waste reduction. As the city grows and we want this sustainable future, resilient community, we really have to look at solid waste from a broad perspective. Okay, next slide. So the next 2 slides are about some of the challenges that we currently face with waste management and how we're hoping to address those through this planning process. So one of the first challenges that we're really facing is that our operational services and our fee structure don't adequately address our current development trends and growth, right? So we're seeing a lot of mixed use, infill, high density, multifamily development. We've got tiny homes and ADUs. We want to see pedestrian improvements and multimodal improvements. And there's a big focus on downtown and how it's growing and how we're going to manage that. And our current service model doesn't really work well with those types of development, right? Like we come and pick up your trash at a single family home, and then that model doesn't really work great in some of these other developments. And so our ordinance is also outdated because of that. Like it doesn't address these types of developments. And so it's really confusing to both staff and residents when we're trying to figure out how we're going to provide service to all of our residents. So the planning process will give us an opportunity to analyze and define what level of service the city is providing in a way that's reliable and equitable and sustainable. It will increase our operational efficiency and financial health. And it'll also give us an opportunity to look outside of our residential services and how waste management happens outside of that to ensure responsible growth. And I do want to talk for just a second about what that means. So we need to not only look at the services that we currently provide to residents, but how waste is managed also in private scenarios. And downtown is a great example of that, right? So we provide some services downtown, but then you also have that picture of an alleyway where there's 5 different dumpsters from 5 different companies trying to all get in there at 5 in the morning to service it, right? And that kind of thing with all of the growth, it really impacts safety and quality of life for folks. So we'll have an opportunity to look at those waste systems and how we can integrate them better into the fabric of downtown. Same with our multifamily services, which I'll talk about a little bit on our next slide. So another one of our challenges is that we're not meeting council's goal to reduce our waste by 50% by 2035. That's primarily due to lack of infrastructure and the goal's lack of accounting for population growth in the context of local and regional resilience. Oh, I'm sorry, to account for population growth. So our goal was to reduce landfill waste to 2010 levels. So, you know, we were at 24,000 tons a year in 2010. And so by 2035, we should be at 11,000 tons. And we did make some initial progress with that goal initially, particularly with the introduction of the Big Blue single stream recycling carts. But since then, the tonnage going to the landfill has sort of steadily increased back to the same 2010 level. So in some ways that's good. Like we've experienced growth, but we're still at 2010 landfill levels, but we're not obviously not meeting that goal that council set. So we just have an opportunity to look at that goal and maybe how we can better meet it or revise it in a way that is that handles the growth that we're seeing. Let's see. We also wanted to talk a little bit about the lack of infrastructure. So with our population increase, obviously our landfill waste is going to increase, but we need, I'm sorry, I just got lost. Excuse me. One of the infrastructure needs that we have is a large-scale composting facility that we've talked about to increase our organics diversion. So organics make up 35% of our current landfill waste, but we don't have a facility for that right now. So that's another reason why we're not meeting our goal. The Buncombe County landfill has a current expected lifespan of around 20 to 25 years. So we need to look at that also in the context of growth of our entire county and region. So we have an opportunity to not just look at the city, but look at like city residential services, but also commercial services and multifamily services, and how that impacts landfill life, which ultimately is going to impact the city, right? So we can collaborate with our local and regional partners to amplify our work and ensure local resilience. We can build on our current county partnerships. We're partnering with the county on our food scraps diversion program, which we've diverted over 300 tons of waste so far. We partner with them on hard to recycle events, and all of that will impact our collective regional goal of extending that landfill life. Okay, next slide. So I was just going to talk a little bit about the scope of work for our RFP for the master planning process. So we're going to look at our existing goals, plans, and studies and identify gaps. We do already have numerous studies in hand. We have a pay-as-you-throw study, The county recently did a waste audit of the city's waste. And then we have the MCAP. And then we'll provide recommendations for what levels of service and what types of service that the city will provide. We also hope that and we also plan to provide a financial analysis, rate model, and fee structure recommendations through the plan. Maybe we'll look at, should solid waste sanitation be an enterprise fund, or should it still come from the general fund? What do those fee levels look like over the next 20 years? We'll provide recommendations for updating our waste reduction goals, accompanied by policies, partnerships, and programs to reach that goal. And then also we will have some heavy engagement with residents, staff, local partners. I envision Buncombe County, our Sustainability Advisory Committee, Asheville Greenworks. We already have numerous neighborhood groups and committees that are excited to participate and help with the planning process. Next slide. Okay, so what we hope to get out of the plan at the end of the day, we'll have a service analysis, those recommendations, and how we're going to grow over the next 20 years. We'll have the fee study and financial structure recommendations. We hope to have a downtown waste storage and collection plan specific to downtown. A citywide waste reduction goal with recommendations on how to get there. Also an internal city facility waste reduction plan, which is tied to the MCAP. And then a revision of our ordinances based on how we plan to move forward. Next slide. So timeline, we're planning to release the RFP in the next couple of weeks, with proposals due in January to give consultants time there, over the holidays to get that completed, and then work with a committee in February to select a consultant, finalize a work plan. And then in March, we will seek council approval and begin the work. And we expect the work to take a year, 3 months. And so around June of 2025, hope to present the final solid waste master plan to council. Next slide. So again, key takeaways. We need a plan to address growth and the challenges that we're seeing and to advance those waste reduction goals. The plan is going to give us those strategies to address those challenges over the next 20 years, and engagement will be an integral part of that process. Next slide. So that is what we're doing right now with the solid waste master plan. Just wanted to check in with this committee to see if you have any other issues or concerns that you think we should be looking at, any other partners that you suggest should be engaged in the process, or any other feedback.
Thanks so much, Jess. I have a handful of thoughts. This is a big body of work that you're going to take on, which is awesome. It definitely seems necessary. As the person who was on staff when we set the waste reduction goal, I can really empathize that the fact that there weren't growth metrics accounted for is definitely time to update that policy. And so I think this comprehensive approach will give us really good information for that policy making for what waste reduction goals are possible. I have a bunch of nerdy questions that I'll wait for once we actually get the plan, but I look forward to really looking at kind of the business model for this. Like, is it an enterprise fund? Are the rates currently covering the full cost of service? All that stuff will be really interesting to see what the consulting team comes back with. So the first thing that I'm wondering about is when we look at this timeline, saying that the plan would come back in June 2025, that kind of signals to me that any conclusions from this plan that would have rate implications would then be the following year. And so I just wanted to hear a little bit more about the timing of that. I know that to some extent the work is going to take a certain amount of time and you can't always fast forward that. But what happens in between the plan getting hopefully adopted in June 2025? Do you need a year of implementation design? That seems like there could be a big lag from the momentum of what we're learning at this master plan before we have to be making, having fee and rate discussions. And so just curious to hear about the timing of that. And, is there going to be a stale lame duck year before we can take any of these recommendations and put them to work?
Thanks, Maggie. Yeah, we definitely discussed that. I would like to see this process wrap up in a year, but I also, so that in March 2025, maybe it's wrapped up, and even still then, it's a little late to be, implementing some fee changes. I just think that we've waited so long. This is a really important plan. I don't want to rush it. And, a downtown plan, that can take a significant amount of time. And then, maybe it ends up with its own fee structure.
Right.
So I want to make sure we have enough time to get it right. I believe there's opportunities, like maybe to implement a fee change mid-year. Is that, I believe that, not preferable, but it's something that's happened before.
It's always possible. I don't know if I'd be curious from Tony, the all-knowing budget master of our budget information. Like, I don't remember us ever doing a mid-year one, but I don't have that locked in. I hear what you're saying, though. You can't rush the work. It just seems like, it's just a question of what, and it does make me wonder if there's ways to stagger some of the deliverables, just so we can keep momentum. And the why from my inquiry comes from just knowing intimately how well you all are doing with so little, and the fact that we have this waste reduction goal. I'm just eager for us to plow forward with the ambition that our community really deserves around solid waste and waste reduction. And I see Greg. Yeah, Greg, you have your hand up.
Yeah, I'm with Jess. This is going to take a little bit of time to get it right. I do fully expect that we'll probably have a request for some rate changes this fiscal year, just due to inflation, staffing, equipment costs, fuel costs. Those things, actually fuel's doing okay now, but the cost of doing business, basically. And maybe there's flexibility to do some of the low-hanging fruit. We've tried to do that as we've moved along already. So I don't see it as a lame duck year, at least on resources. So to get anything meaningful out of the plan, I think it's going to take a minute.
I do like your idea though, Maggie, about, as we work to finalize the work plan with the consultant, just looking at how we might be able to stagger some of those deliverables. That's something that we can work with them on the work plan.
Yeah, because it does wonder, to me, the downtown waste storage and collection plan feels like a really different thing than our residential service. And it will take a lot of different and specific community engagement. So yeah, I trust where you're going. I hear what you're talking about. Just some ideas on is there a staggering opportunity? Deborah.
I would also like to echo what both Jess and Greg have said in terms of implementation. There might be opportunities for low-hanging fruit. We have waited a long time for this plan, not because Greg and Jess haven't been pushing us to do it, but because, timing is everything, and the time was right for us to undertake this effort. But I also want to say that when we are looking at fees and adjusting fees, we like to look at them holistically. That is not just for solid waste, but we also look at water rates. We look at all of our rates so that we can hopefully minimize and mitigate impact.
Yes.
So I think it has to be contextual.
Yeah.
But definitely we want to, as Greg said, there's low hanging fruit. We'll get on it as soon as we can in terms of implementation.
That makes sense. Let me just see if I had any other. I mean, I have other nerdy questions, but we don't need to use committee time for it. I'll learn in the process as we get a lot of the research and detail down. Thanks for letting me go through that kind of slew of thoughts. Anyone else?
What do you mean when you say pay as you throw?
Sure. So a while back, there was a pay-as-you-throw study, and that is a model where, as a resident, you can choose a small, medium, or large trash cart, and they're different fee levels. So if you produce less trash, you pay less, and if you produce more trash, you pay more. And some municipalities have implemented that type of system to promote waste reduction. You know, it incentivizes recycling and reducing waste.
Okay, I have another question. We got some feedback via email from a family living in one of our multi-family housing developments. And she was talking about the amount of trash generated over a weekend. And I think her claim was that our pickup schedule does not keep up with the amount of trash being produced in these multifamily units. So I'm just wondering, how do we meet the demand?
So, most municipal services are designed to collect trash once a week from residents, and we provide a cart. If you have more trash, we can provide additional carts. But in a lot of multifamily units, right, the multifamily units are usually better served by dumpsters from a private company, right? They've got a dumpster on their lot, and that's all private. We do hear from a lot of multifamily residents that maybe their landlords don't provide them with opportunities to recycle. And that is something that I think that the city and the county can look at with as we explore policies related to waste reduction.
So what you're saying is if I live in multifamily, it's my landlord needs to make a decision on how often they're picking up my garbage. They need to, and they pay a private hauler. We aren't involved in that service.
Correct.
So just to bring the conversation into context, it was a resident in one of our housing authority developments, and I'm pretty sure that we pick up in our housing development.
We do pick up in some of our housing developments, and we are specifically working on our project this year to improve our waste collection systems in housing. So for example, I think, is it Maple Crest? They have private dumpsters, and really that's a model that should maybe be applied to some of the other ones. Like we recently did an audit in Pisgah View, and there's a real struggle with the waste management system there. We went and the carts are up by everybody's house, and to get them to collection, some people have to pull them up a hill and over a curb and downstairs. Like that just doesn't work well for anybody. It was difficult for me to get the trash to the curb. So I think in that scenario, we should look at switching them over to a private dumpster system. But we are working with Tara and the housing managers to make some improvements this year.
But switching over to a private doesn't actually mean that it's going to be efficient, right? It's just.
It is if the collection is scheduled and with the frequency that it needs to be, and we can provide estimates for that based on volume of trash.
Okay, got it.
All right.
Thank you so much.
Thanks, Jess. Good luck with all this body of work, and we're here to help and check in as things come together.
I appreciate that. Thank you.
All right. Thanks for the opportunity Manager Campbell, for us to take a look at the scoping phase. I think that's a nice process for us to really understand early where this is going. And I think it'll help, at least with my patience, of it takes time to do good work. I know that, but being able to see up front and really be kept abreast of that's really nice as we patiently wait for the good work to come back to us.
Thank you very much.
All right, our last and final item is the closing public comment for our Public Safety Committee, our Environment and Public Safety Committee. Do we have any closing public comment?
Madam Chair, there is a caller in the queue, but they have not selected the prompt to speak. So no, there is no more public comment.
All right, then let me just say, hey, caller, if you are listening right now, you need to press the prompt, which I believe is *3. And I'll give you the time it takes for me to slowly give you some chance. But I'll, wait another 30 seconds. So before we close and give this caller one more chance, just so folks know, we are canceling our December 26th meeting. But we kind of played up this meeting to make up for it and our next meeting to make up for it. Come January, we'll have our quarterly updates on public safety from our police department and fire department. I know in our previous committee meeting, we talked about an interest in hearing about potential for civilian traffic investigators, for virtual response unit, and also to just have an update and understanding of the police department kind of org chart and sworn officers not. I'm not sure if that will fit in the January timeline, but at a bare minimum, we're going to be continuing to get our data update to see how we're doing and tracking the safety figures. So that'll come January. We also will have a discussion about the urban forestry master plan, which is really exciting to be moving forward on, as well as a federal funding update. The wintertime is when we set our legislative agendas. And as we talked about earlier today, a big role the city can play in pursuing our climate goals is advocating at the state level. So we'll talk about if there's any priorities at large for federal funding, also funding and grant opportunities, as well as kind of legislative priorities. So with that, are there any callers that want to give a public comment?
No, Madam Chair.
Okay, well, there you have it. Thank you so much, everybody. With that,
For just a moment, because we also talked about understanding the use of drones.
yes, yeah. Drone conversation. Thanks. I didn't get that. That's on my list now. Keep tracking.
And we had planned to do that as part of the organizational structure, which will provide you with that kind of level of service explanation, as well as our policy in terms of the use of drones.
That's great. I do think, I just came back from the National League of Cities conference, and lots of talk about technology, especially in public safety. In particular, we've talked about this before, as we have staffing challenges, if we can be using technology to get on site quicker than it takes our response time, we can learn information quicker. And so there's real interest there. And the overwhelming best practice conversation is, if we're going to use technology, wide transparency on what the policies are and good policies up front. And so really eager to see what policies we have on the books. And since we're a policy making body, have conversation about how to make sure that those are transparent and really fair. Great. Thanks for reminding that, Shanika. All right. Unless there's any other thoughts or reminders, we are adjourned. Thanks, everybody.
Thank you. Thank you, staff. Appreciate you.
Bye.